Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, and my co host, as always, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi fascists, and of course those dog faced pony soldiers.
All right. Always never a lack of news and other things to talk about. But
Ooh,
start off with just March 15th. We don't get to broadcast too much on the when it's actually the Ides of March.
Ides of March is the playground of the devil.
Yeah. Is this
And
an
that was-
ominous day? What is this?
so in ancient Rome, this was the day you had to settle your debts. So if you didn't have the money, this is when Rocco and Ted helped you find your checkbook, right? Help the judge. Remember that? So it's also the day that somebody paid back Julius Caesar with a little smackdown. It was the day he was assassinated, right? That's what it is. It used to be that the Romans counted like three. They had like three markers in a month. One was the first of the month, which was called Calend, which is probably where we get calendar from. But the Ides was like the middle. It usually began on the 13th or the 15th of the month. It varied by the month. A lot of times it was after every one of those came after the full moon. And there was one that was like the 6th or 7th of the month. It had another name. So there's a lot of wacky stuff happening out there. But today it means it is cold and windy.
All right. So this made me wonder. So like you're talking about whether or not I was thinking of like is the Ides of March the same time every year? But as you're talking, so it says the Ides of March is the 74th day in the Roman calendar, corresponding to 15th of March. So I don't. So does that mean that it's always the 15th of March?
I think it is now, but it wasn't. It was not always.
It was not then, though. Okay.
Yeah.
It just depended upon it. It's kind of like with my wife and her family. They have, they have U.S. birth dates that they do for legal purposes that they're on their documents, but they have that they follow, I guess, the Chinese calendar generally or something like that. So what that means for them is that if you actually follow that religiously, the birth date moves, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it used to confuse the heck out of me. I said, can you just, like for your parents, will you just set a date, when you're going to do the
one and
celebration?
stick with it.
so I don't have to think about, oh, it's March 8th this year and it's March 15th the next year or something like that.
Wow. I would have done that.
Yeah, I can't handle that whole shifting of the calendar thing. We have St. Patrick's Day coming up this week.
Right. I am checking my phone religiously because elsewhere in the country, Catholic bishops are given dispensation from meatless Lenten Fridays for St. Patrick's Day. And I will be very interested to see if Bishop Michael Burbridge down here in Arlington will do that for us. Because the meatless days kills me.
Is that something that's basically happened once every 7 years or so then?
Yeah,
more or less.
It comes up, every few years, and it has been dispensed in the past.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see.
That's interesting. I had never thought about that. The whole meatless, during the
the Irish, they want to eat the like corned beef and all that kind of stuff. There's some actual food that goes with the holiday.
Right. Yeah, that would. I mean, the meatless Friday and the St. Patrick's Day. If you didn't get the dispensation, that kind of put a damper on some of your St. Patty's Day celebrations.
Sure does.
I mean, you can drink, but if you shouldn't be drinking and not eating.
Yeah, you need to eat if you're gonna.
Yeah, not a good combination to drink only.
Can confirm.
Well, I was thinking about Chicago because I mean, isn't their annual tradition? It's like they dye the river green.
They dye the river green, yeah. So they got going on out there.
If it wasn't so doggone cold in Chicago most of the time in March, I wouldn't mind going there just to see that up close. But
yeah, that's bitter. Especially that part of Chicago is really cold.
Yeah, I still and it will, I mean, we talk about the weather here. I mean, we've got a couple of windy days here. We've, yesterday and today have been extremely windy and everything like that. But, Chicago is known as the Windy City. And for some reason, I don't know what year it was. It always sticks in the back of my mind, just like an opening day game in April, and it was like cold as the dickens, but not unusual for Chicago.
Right. I remember I went one year in Baltimore, and Rodrigo Lopez was pitching for Baltimore. And I don't know if you remember him, but he was famous about, take it back from the catcher and look at it, study it for a while, try to divine some internal messaging, between each pitch. And you're out there in the snow. Terrible.
Yeah, he wouldn't get away.
I can't hit it anyway. He's freezing too,
Yeah. Those days are gone with the pitch clock for the most part, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Rodrigo Lopez would be one of the ones. He would be suffering. He would not do it. I think I don't know if you've seen any spring training baseball. It's a little quick. I think that they're going to have to go back and add 3 to 5 seconds on this stuff because these guys are just, jumping back in. And there was a story. The Athletic had a story saying that it's thrown off how you do broadcasting too, right? Because there was a lot of dialogue that went on between pitches, and now it's like the guy's right back in there. You got to keep talking balls and strikes.
That's also an interesting observation in terms of the pace of the game speeds up. Therefore, all the little chatter when you get some of the color commentary, you can't get as much in there because your play-by-play guy has got a call. I mean, it's a very quick turnaround there and everything. So
right. And while I guess they think they have some survey results that say people want to get out of there, right? Yeah, I do too. People want to get out of there. They don't ask baseball fans this, right? They ask people who are not going to games, what would get you to go to games? Well, why don't you go to games? Well, it takes too long and it's boring. Okay, well, shortening it doesn't really address it being boring, right? So they're gonna, you're not helping those fans, right? They're still gonna look at baseball as way slower than basketball or football. It's not gonna convert them. Meanwhile, the people like us who do watch it, like I go to Nats Park for a game. Game starts at 7:10 or whatever. Whether that game ends at 9:40 or 10:10 matters absolutely none to me, right? I'm not going out that night afterwards. I'm going home, right? And most everybody there is, right? So whether it's now or 20 minutes now or 30 minutes from now, no one cares, right? The only people griping about this are sports writers trying to get to the bar before closing time, and media, baseball front office types, right? Because the rest of us, that's not, it's not a concern of ours. And, they're addressing concerns the actual fans don't have. And so what happens is, what I think is going to happen, and I'd be surprised if this doesn't happen, what the people watching on TV do care about is those conversations, right? Those two guys visiting. I mean, a lot of work goes in baseball to getting that chemistry between the play-by-play guy and the color guy just right. And having them, and then you have the sideline reporter, and how do they all mix together and work together, and the stories they're telling and the conversations they're having. That's a big part of watching a game on TV. Now it's really 2 balls, 1 strike. Here's the pitch. That's a ball, 3-1. Here comes the next pitch, So that's going to take away that collegiality. That's going to take away that conversation that people are part of in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, what are watching sporting events, basketball, football on television, with a muted or just a kind of a truncated color commentary. That color commentary stuff is, to me, is integral to part of that experience of watching sports on TV. You learn a lot. You get, and listen to some interesting things. I mean, listening to them call balls and strikes, not as interesting, without the color commentary in there.
The stories and the history and
the tidbits, all these things that they throw in and all of that. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I think you're right. I mean, Tim Kirchin is generally, he doesn't like this. He's a lifelong baseball fan. He grew up here in the area, went to Walter Johnson High School. He understands why they're doing it in a sense, but he doesn't really like it. And I agree with him. And I agree with you that, the baseball purists, the true fans of the game, they're not the ones that have been complaining about the length of games.
Right. That's right.
And 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 as far as these extra inning games, going on for 12 or 15 innings, that's baseball. That's part of
Yeah,
the excitement of baseball is
yeah.
just, how long is this thing going to go, and all of these kinds of things. It's
I
like,
watched till the end. I was there
yeah,
all 17 innings.
now that, now they've been putting that ghost runner or whatever you want to call it, to try to shorten up and speed up the game. It's like, well, that's not fair. That's not baseball,
Right. Yeah. The other thing is, for 150 years, they let you put your defenders anywhere you want. That's right. That's right. So that's the other thing, pickoff throws. So
Yeah.
like at some point, the base stealer is gotcha, right? If he knows you can't throw over, he can just take off. So I mean,
Right.
some things got to happen on that.
Right. And I think that I mean, we'll get more stolen bases, and stolen bases are an exciting part of the game. But on the other hand, this is almost like a manufactured way of doing it, because you've now limited the pitcher on the pickoff moves. And then that means this guy's got the green light in essence,
Yeah.
because he knows there's no throw coming there, and the best the catcher, and then the catcher's just hoping that he can catch that ball and get it down there. Not an easy throw to make a lot of times.
When the guy can leave early on you, basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
there's
like,
just,
that's got to change. They can't keep that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe baseball games have gotten, I know that they've gotten, gradually longer. I do think part of that is just the changing nature of things, is that I keep thinking about, when we were younger, complete games, pitchers would throw 10 or 15, 20 complete games in a year. That's a lot of starting pitchers.
Right.
You'd have starting rotations like the Orioles starting forward. Those guys would throw a bunch of complete
they
games.
have 4 20-game winners. I mean, no one pitches enough to get 20-game wins anymore.
Yeah, that's also another rare achievement. I mean, not that Denny McClain's, what was it, 30 or 31, would have ever been achieved again, but you can't even get anywhere close to these things because of all these different things of way the pitchers are. 6. I still have a problem of just the statistical thing of saying, 6 innings and giving up 3 runs or less. 3 runs or less is the quality, start. Let's say, but if you gave up 3 earned runs, that's 4.5 runs a game. That's not quality baseball, in my opinion.
Right. I'm with you on that one.
So yeah, we could have this whole discussion about this, because it just really, as we're nearing, opening day, it's just kind of frustrating to see all this, that the game is being turned into something. Rob Manfred and all these guys in baseball think that they have to be there to be able to compete better with the NBA or the NFL and stuff like that. Baseball is America's pastime. It's a great game. Go and experience it in person for yourself. You understand what a great game it is. And all these complaints about time. Ugh. I mean, look, NFL games, a lot of other games are stretching out too. It's like, are they going to go in there and start tinkering even more with the rules there?
Yeah, they're talking about tinkering with college football.
Yeah.
Now, no one, I've never heard anybody say, boy, I wish these college football games would end quicker, right? The people watching on TV, they're still loving it. The people at the stadium obviously want it to keep going on. What's the hurry? And they're talking about, all these rule changes. They're going to take 25 plays a game off. Who volunteered? Who voted for taking 25 plays out of the game?
Yeah.
Who's for that? Who said, yeah, we got to do that?
Yeah, I think Michael Wilbon and you guys are on the same page with that, because I heard him on one of the PTI podcasts. I think that came up during a brief discussion with Kornheiser, and Wilbon is a huge college football fan. He's a Northwestern grad. He follows all of the Northwestern teams, and he was just like you. So it's like I'm fine with the game being the way it is. It's like, do I care if I have to spend an extra 30 minutes to an hour? No, I love college football.
Yeah, that's right. So, like, I tell you what,
this is back to your point.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right. They're not going to join. They're off doing something else that they like better. That's fine too. I will say this: all those guys that you see on TV, I've met quite a few of them over the years. Mike Wilbon is one of the nicest people I've met. And really good about, he remembers being small time, and he feels for the guys who are in the higher positions of journalism. So
I'll say this is that the PTI podcast, is one of my favorite podcasts because the combination of Kornheiser and Wilbon, I mean, they worked together for a number of years at the Washington Post. They know each other really well. I think they've won a bunch of Emmys or whatever they get for that show, and it does very well for ESPN. But they are just how they gel, how they are just the two of them. They're great together. They're funny as heck. They're extremely knowledgeable because they've been covering sports for decades. And they're not, you just don't get the feeling that they feel self-important about themselves, right? So that they understand sports and they want to give it to the sports fans at the sports fans level, and not get too high and mighty, and they don't get political. That's the one thing about that show, is that in general it doesn't go the way of Around the Horn, which starts to hit on those meteor issues, and pontificate about some things. And it's like, I'm not here. I'm not here to watch you talk about that issue. I want you to talk about sports, and not the political aspect of, transgenderism and all this other stuff. I want to know what you think about the sports and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So,
I will say this, as we're talking about how we know these people, the Around the Horn, that's Tony Reali, right?
Right.
Okay.
Tony Reali, smart guy.
He's a very smart guy. He's also a Montgomery County guy. And he is the best softball player I've ever gone against. And it ain't close. When he comes to bat, it's just about a guaranteed run for his team. I mean,
he's also an example of, you want to make it in something. He started off doing stats. He's a stat guy, right?
Yeah.
And until he got his own show, and then the show does great.
Yeah. He's a good guy too. He's a nice guy too.
Yeah, he's got a very unique style about him, and how he handles all of his all the people that appear on the show. And he's, because you never know from day to day who's going to be on the show, and it's kind of an interesting mix of people. And he's always introducing, kind of changing the mix a little bit, introducing new people throughout the whole thing too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's good to interject that personal side of this as well. Let's move on to actual other news.
Okay.
We'll get back to sports at the end again, maybe, right? So Russia downed a drone over the Black Sea. So that's gotten to be a little bit of a kerfuffle as to who's to blame for this. The Russians are all, well, no, they're having the thing in the U.S. What's the skinny here on this?
Well, my understanding is that we didn't really lose control of our drone, and that we chose to down it. We chose to take it out of the theater where the Russians couldn't find it and down it. They sprayed fuel on it. It looks like they saw this things and they just went and tried to bully it, right? They flew around, flew in front of it and sprayed fuel on it and did a bunch of dangerous maneuvers in international airspace. The drone was where it was supposed to be. And there are always drones and aircraft up over that area, right? The U.S. monitoring what goes on over there. There's nothing new about it. And the Russians, this was a couple of jerks. I think that'll end up being their explanation, is that there's a couple of guys that got out of hand. But it's a thing about the Russians, they're not disciplined, right? Their explanation for this is either, they're not watching closely enough to make sure that the policy is being carried out on the battlefield, or they are, and they don't care about stuff like this happening, right? Because this drone is where drones and aircraft always are. It's not posing some new threat. They claimed it was flying toward their territory, but we all know better. That's the other thing. It's you got to remember, they have no compunction about telling you bald-faced lies that you can easily detect and prove wrong. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They've said it, and the public record shows it, and they don't care. So you can't trust them. And so this thing is down, and it's, I guess the Russian ambassador was summoned to the State Department and lectured and so forth. And so I think our stance is that the Russians are out of line here, and it looks like from what people are saying that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't put this down here. I mean, I meant to, but I just because I wanted to get your thoughts about Xi Jinping. He's now in his unprecedented third term now. what's your take on China here? I mean, are we seeing them basically just completely undoing the Deng Xiaoping, everything that he was doing? I mean, are they becoming more militant? What's going on here?
Well, I mean, what's going on is that, the U.S. leadership is perceived as weak. And so anything anybody's been wanting to do for a while, it's sort of like, you're only going to get 2 more years of this guy. I really don't see him being reelected because there's a lot of corruption stuff that's about to come up on him. These SARS reports the House has and so forth. So, I don't think Biden will be reelected. So I think there's a real urgency in China and Russia to do your things that we wouldn't want you to do now while we have a weak president and weak military leadership in place, diplomatic leadership in place. And I think that's part of why they're saber rattling on Taiwan. I think that's why they're talking about, the threat of Russia and China getting together against us has long been there, right? And we, it's been talking since we were little kids. They've been saying, man, Russia and China ever get on the same page, but the Russians and Chinese don't trust each other either. And for very good reason. They have a long disputed border themselves. And so them getting on the same page is not as likely as it may look or seem. So, I don't know how much I worry about that. They will do temporary things when it's temporarily to both of their benefit, but I don't see any kind of lasting alliance. Now, what is dangerous and made news to me this week is that the Chinese brokered a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, the way we had that fixed was we had Saudi Arabia and all the Arab nations joined with Israel sort of against Iran, expanding its nuclear program and its meddling in foreign affairs elsewhere in Israel, West Bank, and so forth. That we had the whole Arab world and Israel signed up against Iran, and the weakness of this leadership is now the Saudis have signed up with Iran. Right, which those are two different kinds those are the two opposing kinds of Muslims, right? There's one is Sunni and the other is Shia. So they've made an historic alliance too, and that's two powers that could be a very hostile, dangerous thing to the U.S. to U.S. interests. The Jews have the Saudis have no compunction now to deal with the Jews, which they did before. This is a major foreign policy debacle, suffered just in the last few days. No one writing about it.
Yeah, I mean, what's the Biden administration response on this?
None so far. I mean,
yeah, interesting, right?
It's like all these things. It's like we let that spy balloon fly all the way over the country, photograph everything it wanted to, right? Ship all the data back, and then when it got off the South Carolina coast, we sprang into action of what to do. It's like these banks in California, like 3 days, and it's anything, because they don't know what to do, right? They're not prepared for anything. I think that one of the big untold stories is how absolutely it's not just ideologically. I disagree with the Biden administration ideologically, but just the massive incompetence in everything they do. It's unbelievable. I'm not sure we can survive it.
Yeah, I mean when a lot of times when these Democrats get into office, and it's like, okay, look, we weren't fans of Obama or Clinton, Biden, things like that, but I mean they are and were the president. So from that perspective, from one perspective, you support them because you want them to at least prevent anything bad from happening to the American people, right? To our country. Right. The incompetence of this administration is staggering because it just seems as like they are really saying one thing while another thing is happening. I mean, we every month, we just got another inflation report, and more inflation reports will be coming, soon as well. And so the line is still like, we're doing great. Jobs are great. Inflation is down, gas prices are down, kind of the same canard. It's like, yeah, but exactly how are people doing with these gas prices compared to when you took office? How much higher are prices of basic goods since you took office?
Right.
so inflation's running at a 6% rate instead of a 9% rate or whatever.
Right. And
Okay.
it was 1.4 when you started.
Yeah, it's still extremely high compared to
Still four times what it was when you started.
Yeah, and it's like I'm running around. I was at I stopped by Aldi last week to get something, I think, for my wife, and she's like, check the egg prices, because she's always kind of curious about that. Because I had been at Costco a few days before that, and for the last 2 or 3 trips I've made to my local Costco, they haven't had like the 18 pack or the 2 dozen pack of regular eggs. They've had them only in brown eggs, which are much more expensive.
Yeah.
Or you could buy like 60 eggs. It's like, I don't need 60 eggs. Okay. I want 1 to 2 dozen eggs max. So I'm popping them over at Aldi, and I'm just like, whoa, look, they're $2.11. Well, that's even if you even if you do the math, that's even a better price per egg than Costco if they'd had the eggs, and so,
Yeah.
so you can't, but a little over a year ago, my wife was paying 87 cents for like jumbo eggs at Walmart.
Yeah.
Because like, so, it's still too high. It affects things that we do. My wife would make a lot of egg-based. She would make some breakfast for our young missionaries, and there's these casserole things for breakfast, stuff like that. They require a lot of eggs. She doesn't make it as much right now because the price of eggs shot up. It does affect what a lot of people do. And I'm not on the lowest side of the economic spectrum, but people who are really struggling to get by, I mean, bread, milk, eggs, when these prices go up, it really affects them.
Yeah, it really does.
And Biden doesn't understand this at all.
Right. They don't understand. They don't care. It's not a priority to them at all.
Yeah, I don't know if somebody asked Joe Biden what the average price of eggs, milk, or bread were, would he even have the remotest clue as to what they are?
No, no. It's their whole thing is like cooking up the story they're going to tell about whatever just happened.
Right. And so there's
no principles back there. Well, my principles dictate that I deal with this in this way. It's just what gets us the softest ride from the media.
Right. So we'll segue into what you had just been alluding to, which was on this banking collapse. So Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, became the second largest, bank failure in our history, I guess, after Washington Mutual back during the financial crisis.
Yeah.
And the thing is that Biden's out there trying to reassure Americans that everything is fine. On the other hand, they're, rather than dealing with it and actually getting to the root of the problem, they're saying like, well, the reason that this happened is because Trump, rolled back some of the, Dodd-Frank regulations when he was in office. But that's false. It's a lie.
Yeah.
Even Barney Frank
came out and said it's a lie.
Barney Frank of
Dodd-Frank fame. What does he know, right? And then somebody said, well, he's on the board of Signature Bank. Right. So he would know. I don't think just because he's on the board of Signature Bank that he would spare Donald Trump this criticism if it was due. Right. He told you this because it's not Donald Trump's fault. And it's like this reflex they have to like figure out a way to blame it on Trump no matter what happens, right? You're 2.5 years into this now. You don't get to blame stuff on Trump anymore, right? It's you. You're the one who has to fix it. So, what happened is, this is a bank that spent a lot of money on securities that went down and they didn't replace it. And, they invested in values rather than ability to repay, right? They wanted to invest in a lot of green energy and regenerative projects and woke this and that and the other. And, that's the price you pay, right? Business is business. The bank balance, the magic of the balance sheet does not change.
Yeah. I mean,
you are not immune from the laws of nature.
That's mostly true. I mean, I do remember it until things got a little better. Obama just kept, anything bad in the economy was always Bush's fault.
Right. And they were basically the same, right? They're the differences in their economic policy are infinitesimal, right?
Yeah. I think people have got to learn about how banks operate, though. It's that, there've been quite a few references to It's a Wonderful Life, and the bank run there where people showed up and they wanted their money, and and Jimmy Stewart says, like, he says, well, I don't have the money in the safe. He says it's over there at George's house or whatever. It's because what they do is that they take in your money, right? And then they in order to earn money to pay the deposits and make a profit and pay their staff, they have to go and they lend their money at a higher interest rate, and that's their profit center, is earning money on the loans. Now, Silicon Valley Bank, this was a darling of the tech sector. This has been, and you kind of mentioned this, they invested in lots of green energy stuff and things like this, but Roku, which is the little TV, set-top box thing, they had $487 million of their money in there. I listened to a tech podcast, and the guy behind that also is a startup investor, and he had lots of his startups had several $1 million, in there, because they raise money, they put it in the bank. And what bank would they do? It was a Silicon Valley Bank, because one of the things about SVB was just that they were also, because they understood the tech, industry and the tech kind of the way how they thought. They would do things that were probably where traditional banks would not do. They would loan you money. They would loan money to operations that would probably not qualify otherwise. A lot of startups, a lot of areas, because they knew what the risk reward ratio was and doing this. But they got flooded with money. So they had all this money. This has actually been somewhat of a problem for all banks. I mean, during the pandemic, people, all those stimulus payments, people put money in the bank, which were paying very low interest, but banks got flooded with deposits, and there was no loan demand. And so what do you do with that? Where do you put that money? A lot of them, you could put some of that money with the treasury, and the treasury would pay you some. But, I don't fault Silicon Valley Bank for investing in treasury securities and things like that, because usually you get to hold those until they mature, and then you get all your money back, and then you get a little bit of interest on that money, and that would be better than what they could get elsewhere. The problem is that once people started to withdraw their money, they no longer had the ability. They no longer had enough cash on hand to satisfy all those withdrawals. So then they had to start selling their security positions at a loss. And so that only exacerbated the whole problem. Now, one of the problems the feds have is that they can't find anybody to sell the bank to. They tried one auction and it failed. In essence, they had one bidder and they turned it down. They're going to try again and see if they can't find somebody to take it over. The British arm of SVB, Barclays, I think, HSBC is buying it for like £1, and then they're going to take on some of the liabilities, and I guess they'll get some guarantees. But the federal government is looking for a way to do this. What's one of the other arguments about all of this is just that, in order to try to calm the markets, they're saying, well, everybody will get access to their money as of yesterday. But then we have the question of, well, SIPC guarantee, they basically backstop your money for $250,000. What happens to someone like Roku with $487 million in there? Do they lose the rest? Well, traditionally, they don't necessarily lose all of it, but the government would then take it, sell the bank off, and then recoup whatever it could, and then give you whatever they could on the dollar. Maybe it's 50 cents or 60 cents on the dollar or whatever. Right. But it looks like what the government is saying right now is just like, everybody's going to be made whole. Who cares about the $250,000 thing? In essence, setting a precedent that you can't have a bank, no matter how much money you have in the bank, the government's always going to be there. And they're trying to tell us, they're trying to tell everybody that we're not going to be paying for that.
Right. It's not a bailout. It's not a bailout. Walks like a bailout, talks like a bailout. It's a bailout.
Yeah, no, they're lying. And you mentioned, Barney Frank. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, look, he was on the board of Signature Bank, which also failed. Now, Signature had I mean, they were another one of the banks for the crypto industry. The other Silvergate had already failed.
Right.
Crypto is, you get into crypto, you live or you die. I mean, that's just, that is a highly volatile and speculative investment. And if you can make money in crypto, fine. But a lot of people are getting their head handed to them on a platter and
Sure are.
wailing and gnashing of teeth about their investments. And a lot of people can't get access to their crypto because of these failures,
Yeah.
of all these things that are going on. So there are a lot of problems out there. Today, the problem is Credit Suisse.
Yeah.
Because I think it actually was the Saudis or something like that have been their backstop, and they say no more.
No more
And now
backstop.
Credit Suisse is in trouble, and it's sending shivers back through the market and regional banks. It's interesting because regional banks have been considered somewhat safe. They've been supposedly relatively conservative, but any bank that has basically bought U.S. Treasuries is when they to invest in for the money that they couldn't loan out, they didn't have enough loan demand. They're all getting hit right now because Wall Street looks at them and says, oh, if you actually mark to market your investments, you actually you're not as well capitalized as you used to be. So I don't know. Are we going to get more regulation as a result of this? I mean, Elizabeth Warren's out there banging the drum.
I think regulation got us into this. I'm not sure it's a way to get out.
Yeah, this is.
That's right. That's correct, but that's true.
I don't know. I mean, we're Brian, I swear, I think the longer we live, the stranger the bedfellows get sometimes on.
Yeah, and I'll say this though. So, and this is kind of how this is shaken out too. Barney Frank was obviously on the other side from me politically, but I was on the Hill when he was on the Hill, and he was a straight shooter for the other side. Right, I didn't agree with him. I wasn't on his side, but he was for what he was for, and for honest, explainable reasons. Right, and I don't think he ever took a dime. He wasn't supposed to have. He could have fooled me, but it looked like I remember one day I helped him carry. He got out of this cab with he was forever rumpled. Right, it was like he just couldn't dress right. And he had 4 of these big suitcases, and he was trying to. So I'm like, let me help you, and I carried his stuff. It helped him carry his stuff in. So, which was heavy, right? He had a bunch of stuff, but
he always looked kind of disheveled, right?
Yeah, he was rumpled, but he at least tells you the truth about this, right? He doesn't cloud it in politics. He's like, it's not what it was.
And that's the thing, that would be, something about politicians. I mean, you've had some Hill experience, so you've seen some of these people up close. And, I'm not the kind of person that's just going to say, I hate all Democrats or I love all Republicans. I want to know who they really are and what they really stand for, and that I want them to be as honest as they can be, and just do that. I mean, if you're passionate about your cause and your beliefs, that's great. It
doesn't mean the other people are should be hated,
right? No,
I used to talk to Jerry Nadler all the time. He was the rare congressman who he almost always ate lunch alone, right? Well, almost all of them. If they eat lunch somewhere, you can see them, right? They're not behind closed doors somewhere. Then it's with a bunch of aides or people seeking meetings with them or whatever. They're rarely alone, just sitting there at a table eating. But he usually was, and you could go, it's a cafeteria. You could go sit by him and start yakking, and he would either yak or he wouldn't. So you knew some of those people, and you could tell which ones. Like John Lewis, who gets a lot of credit for being a statesman or whatever, was not. He was he was brave. He walked across that bridge at Selma and whatnot, but he was not a nice guy. He was not good. He was mean as he could be to the other side.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, I mean, I always tell people, who've been around for a while, Sam Donaldson was someone that a lot of, conservatives, Republicans hated. But I said, look at it this way. Yeah, I mean, he had his whole act going on there with, yelling after Reagan, going towards the helicopter, Mr. President, and whatnot. But the thing about Sam was that, during those, for years at CPAC, he willingly came into the lion's den for those events with Bob Novak, and he volunteered. I mean, he asked. He would ask
He
basically.
made a point of like he was at some MRC stuff,
Yeah,
and like he would come to their event, and and you, Sam, why are you such a jerk? Like whatever. But that's yeah, that's right. That's true. A lot of them don't believe the stuff they're spewing day after day, and others even more troublingly do. So,
right. Yeah.
so, but yeah, so it does make a difference if you know them. It does,
It does. All right, let's move on to the Twitter files, just because of this kind of wild exchange. That the Democrats, they were had this hearing, and the Democrats, had their time, and they're trying to grill Matt Taibbi and was it Michael Schellenberger
right.
about anonymous sources and who gave them the Twitter files, and make it some big Elon Musk conspiracy and some right wing thing. And I mean, Schellenberg, I mean, he didn't vote. He voted for Biden. He said,
Both of them said they voted for Biden.
they're not conservatives, and the Democrats. I don't even. They're so idiotic with this. I mean, the Twitter files were bad for the liberals. It exposed a lot of stuff that I think we the conservatives had long suspected about. Twitter and Facebook probably has the same issues and things like this.
Government, dealing with people inside the government.
Yeah.
It's one thing for a social media company, a bunch of liberals decide to censor you. It's another thing when the government's sending them over a list of. And so those hearings, they focused on two things. One of them is trying to get them to say that Elon Musk gave them the Twitter files. I mean, it seems to me pretty apparent that if he did not actually hand over the Twitter files himself, he at least approved them being handed over, right? But I mean, they want to drill down that. Someone's told them that's a line of questioning to really hammer on, and it makes no difference. And the people looking at they have like these people who just got elected, or they haven't been there long, they don't have much of a name. So one of the things Democrats are doing in the House, especially, is they don't have any power, right? They really can't do anything. So they get these new members. They say, hey, you can raise your profile, ask these difficult questions, put these guys on the spot. You'll be on TV. And the questions like this one, the people just look stupid, right? It's like no one asked them this. No one, this is not how these things go. And then, Matt Taibbi worked for Rolling Stone for 20 years. The ranking member, who she doesn't have a vote in Congress either, right? She's Virgin Islands. Gets up and calls them so-called journalists.
Right.
Like, why are they so-called? Right? They're journalists. They write their bylines. They are journalists, and so it's just all kinds of they're telling them to be fantastically bad and disruptive about this to try to discredit it, so that's part of what's going on there. They are not, though, they're not landing any gloves, right? What came out, and it's not deniable. So the other thing is, like Jerry Connolly, my esteemed congressman from Virginia 11 over here, the thing he pursues and all these things is Trump asked for some tweet to be taken down, something to do with Chrissy Teigen. And I don't know what it was, but it was just meanness or whatever. And, so like, say Trump did it too. It's like, okay, Trump did it once. These guys, they had 100 or more employees, government employees, every day directed by the people above them to go order the censorship of anything against the Democrat leftist woke agenda, right? So it's one against zillions, right? It's not moral equivalent. So they're kind of in a bad place on what they're trying to argue there.
Yeah, I kind of almost wonder. I mean, because whether or not part of the strategy too is just let's take our backbenchers and we'll put them out there, because we can't actually do anything about this.
Yeah.
So there will be our sacrificial lambs, because like, who in the heck had ever even heard of this non-voting rep from the Virgin Islands before?
Yeah, and the other woman, the Garcia from Texas, and it's like, do you understand like what you're in? And the journalists are like, what? Because no one who knows what they're doing in Washington has ever or will ever ask them these questions, right? These are total like people from the sticks who don't know any better.
Look, I mean, if you know you're going to be asked to do the questions, do your homework.
Yeah,
try to look somewhat intelligent. Don't
right.
ins-
Because what they're
don't
doing is they're taking direction from committee staff, right?
yeah.
Committee staff is saying this is a real bad line of questioning for us. You know, the facts, all the facts that are going to come out are going to reflect badly on us. So what do we do? And their strategy is muck it up. Just, you know, throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see if you can make it stick. You know, get them off on other topics, drill down on things that don't matter, you know, and make a jerk of yourself, right? To just cloud the issue. So they're on, you know, now you're on TV saying really stupid things.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty clear that, Musk has approved of this. Whether or not he handed everything over directly or not, we don't really know because we're not there. And and Taibbi, I mean, they're trying to defend. The Democrats went after him about anonymous sources, and so what if Elon handed this stuff off to some low level employee, some employee to do this? Is like, um, they kept hammering away at this, but you got to give Taibbi and Schomburg. I mean, they just stood their ground. I think they knew that, you know, that these Democrats had nothing, that they were going to, they could pound that angle all they wanted, and they were going to get nowhere on this.
Yeah. It's like watching a fight in the pool,
Yeah.
You can't really get your legs down to punch. So they're,
Yeah, so I don't know. All right, so Trump and Pence seem to be having I don't know. I don't know if I call it a war of words, but they definitely have different opinions about January 6th, about who's to blame.
Yeah, they do. Trump, Pence is the farther he gets from Trump, the more emboldened he feels to say these things. Right? It's kind of funny. It's like if he knows Trump's not around or listening or in the room, he pipes up a little bit. If he's on TV or whatever, he's a lot more reserved. He doesn't want Trump to see him saying these things. Like he can say something at the what was it? What was the dinner? It was one of the big alpha dinner. What was it? Whose dinner was it he was speaking at?
I don't remember.
Pence. Okay. He gets in there and he runs his mouth about, Trump was responsible for this and that. Trump was responsible for, he called a rally. He said, I'm going to give a speech, then we're going to march down to the Capitol peacefully. Right? Yeah, he did that. You can't deny that. He wouldn't deny that accusation, right?
Oh, that was gridiron.
Gridiron, right. And Pence is trying to make that like, he brought about some violence and all this stuff. And that's not true. And Pence knows that's not true. Pence's presidential campaign hopes have gone up in smoke, right? He's not raising any money or gaining any attention. By the way, I think that one of the most important things that happened this week is that I don't know if DeSantis comes back from the mistake he made on Ukraine. Right? Tucker Carlson, people don't know, sent out questionnaires to all the Republican candidates about their feelings about Ukraine, about Russia and Ukraine and so forth. And alone among the respondents, DeSantis said there was no vital interest to protect there. Right. So he's the only one who walked that plank. The yahoos of the right are like, yeah, somebody told him, spoke truth to power. Right. And everyone else is like, wait for 28, buddy, because you're not ready for 24. I think he really stepped in it there.
Yeah, I mean,
everybody else, even people who more or less agree with the tenor of his response, didn't get trapped into making that stupid statement. So it just that's a kind of mistake that you're a rookie and you need more seasoning.
Yeah, I mean, but Trump's not like a big Ukraine guy either, right? I mean, he was warning about.
That's my point. Is like Trump is not being accused of saying something stupid here. Trump gave a response, and it's just we're giving them every dollar and blah blah blah. Okay, that's fine, right? But DeSantis said it's not a vital interest, right? It was like we don't really care. So I mean, DeSantis said the dumb thing. Trump conveyed the same feelings without saying the dumb thing.
Yeah, I mean, up to this point in time, I mean, I think DeSantis, there was a path for him. I mean, he and Trump there were some differences, but when you go down on this Ukraine thing, I mean, this is I don't know. I mean, I think he now opens up a lane for other people to come in and at least challenge, more credibly, because I don't think you're going to hear any other Republican candidates come out and do the Ukraine thing like that. I mean,
Right.
we've talked about on the show multiple times about the Republicans who keep, making noise about why we're giving all this money to Ukraine. But, I support the president and support Ukraine here, is that we need to defend Ukraine. We can't let Russia take over. And, yeah, DeSantis, that was a big mistake. I mean, at this point, I was like, so now what are your differences? And you use the word vital interest on top of that. I don't know. That's going to be pretty tough. Now it's still in the early stages. Who knows what the heck else is going to happen? But not a good move on DeSantis's part if he's really seriously considering running in 2024.
Yeah, avoidable
Nikki
mistake.
Haley has already called it what kind of like the echo chamber or whatever. Just now what's the difference between DeSantis and Trump? On this, we don't need another Trump type candidate or whatever. So he's given other people an opening, which is not something you want to do.
That was a big mistake. I don't think the people who follow all this have glommed onto the fact that was a big daggum mistake.
Yeah. I do want, so I don't, I'll throw this in and then we'll just wrap up. So Michelle Yeoh, been watching her for a number of years, really since the old Crouching Tiger. What was it?
Yeah.
Hidden Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I think it was.
Yeah.
So she won an Oscar, and she threw some shade at Don Lemon about women and their achievements. It was great.
Oh yeah, he said that you're not past your prime, right?
Yeah, past your prime. Apparently, Don Lemon on the program, when they discussed the Oscars, he just totally try to ignore anything about Michelle Yeoh at all. But what I thought was funny, what I thought was interesting though, was that kid from the Indiana Jones movie, the little kid, he won an Oscar too, right? And after all these years, it's like, wow, there are not a ton of roles, or hadn't been a ton of roles for Asian actors in Hollywood, but here's a guy who found a path, and it was definitely a very Asian themed Oscar for them. Those were big wins for them. So being half Japanese, being married to a Korean, I'm all for Asian power. I don't watch the Oscars because I think it's just a mucky mess, but whatever. All right. Anyway, time to wrap it up.
Okay. I will say, let's see. I want to, because these bans of gas cars after 2035, you don't know what's going to happen in 12 years, but I don't see that sticking. I see them having to crawfish off that. I don't see enough infrastructure ready in 12 years, or electric power generation capacity ready in 12 years to go away from combustion engine cars. I had to think about what ICE stood for there.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw that in and say, so does anybody know? Everybody knows what that stands for?
What did the Pope say about celibacy? I saw that and look it up.
Yeah, no, he's put that on the table, that celibacy may not be required for priests going forward. So this is a very broad thing that there's that there are Catholics out there in other parts of the world that have been pushing for this. So I think he's some people are trying to sway him on this. I don't know anything.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get that moved. I think that there's sort of a rising sort of blockade on this Pope, right? He's 86 and people are realizing that he's not going to be Pope a lot longer, and that what he's trying to do before then is a pretty radical realignment on some stuff. And like the guy on the way out the door shouldn't be in charge of radical realignment, right? He won't be here to adjust or appreciate the consequences. So I don't think.
I don't know. I mean, how you, from your standpoint, I mean, how do you think Catholics would feel if they did away with that? I mean,
I don't think it would go over well at all. I think there's a reason this is done, and it's the right, it's done for the right reason.
Yeah, it's not like this policy has been in place just for a little while. It's been in place for a long time.
Yeah, since about the 4th century. So
yeah.
And there was a good reason for it then, right? And that reason hasn't changed, right? Yeah. The priest he belongs to the church. The last thing I would say, March Madness. I don't give a lot of tips on this, and You know, I have been, you know, really extremely wrong about these things before, but uh, Alabama is a rare opportunity, I think, to get on one early and win, because Alabama plays in a Power 5 conference. And if you go look at the margin of victory of their game, it was like an AAU team that couldn't find good competition. You know, like you look at Big Ten scores, it's rare to see a Big Ten score that's more than about 12, 14 point margin, right? Alabama was winning games, but over multiple teams by 35, 40, 45 points. So that kind of margin of victory tells me that's going to be a tough team. They have some margin for error. You know, they can play a bad game and still be better than you. I know they played LSU. The first time they played LSU this year, it was 59-22 at the half, and they ended up winning by 40. So, you know, a team that can just run you off the court like that is dangerous this time of year, because it's just hard to keep up. So
I just want to give a shout out to Howard University for making it.
Yeah.
They won't survive. They won't last very long, but in all likelihood. But hey,
give them Kansas. You win that one, buddy. You deserve it. The guy, one of their assistant coaches, shoots on our baskets up here, right up on the top of my hill. Wow. And so, like, my kids know him. They're all fired out to like high five him and everything.
It's been a good year for Howard. Their swim team did great this year, and so good for Howard.
Football team was a little bit better.
Yeah.
I remember the time me and you went to see them play. They weren't very good that day.
And I'll be rooting for what I used to call the Lady Terps, but I guess it's just the Terrapin women team. The men's team will be okay, but the women's team has see if they can get to the Sweet 16 or at least the Final Four. They got a good team, but there are a lot of good women's teams this year.
Yeah, LSU has a good women's team too. They have one of Maryland's best players from last year. It's one of their best players now. But a girl I used to coach against. I don't know how far they'll go. They've kind of skidded at the end, so it'll be interesting to see.
South Carolina is good.
I think unless you can beat South Carolina, we're all just playing for fun anyway, right?
That's right. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As always, please stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. And I'll see what we do for next week. I'll be in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm not exactly quite sure where I'll be physically located. So I'll be contacting you. Hopefully I'll pull a show off from out there somewhere. Right. I don't know if it's at Spencer's apartment or my sister-in-law's place or whatever. So I don't, but I'll give you a spring training report.
There you go. That's what we need.
As I go to the Cactus League. All right, everybody, have a great day. Have a great week. And we'll see you again next week.